Meg, could you get them quiet, please?
It's about time to start.
Thank you, Meg. Well, I think that this, I have felt that this is one of the most difficult assignments I've had. Not that I didn't understand the book, but how to discuss it has really got me a little shaky on that. So, dear Lord, bless us. We need your help. How many have read a little bit of this book? Oh, wow.
Nobody.
No, yes, turn around, yes. well, thank you for that. And I hope we can have an open discussion. But first of all, just a little bit about Miroslav Volf. He is an Episcopalian. I didn't know that before this and so forth, and Googling him and all. And he came here to visit his brother-in-law. They're both Croatian Americans from Croatia. He came here and he came to church one day, and I was at the back and I was able to greet him going out, and that was quite an honor. But Peter Kuzmic, who taught at Gordon Conwell and also back in a little seminary in Croatia, he would go back and forth. He was a professor of world missions at Gordon Conwell for many years, was the brother-in-law to Miroslav Volf, and that brought him here to this area. But Volf is amazing. Amazing theologian, very, very well-known, popular. He's written 20 books. This is his latest. But I used his book, Exclusion and Embrace, as one of the deepest books on racial relations and relating to the other personally. You can see how that might tie in with this book in terms of his thinking. He draws on culture a lot, and he's an intellectual historian of sorts, so he draws on sources from the past. And he's also written a book on Allah, a Christian perspective, which brings Islam and Christianity pretty close together in that book without diverging from his own Christian faith. And so Miroslav Volf is quite a person. And so here we have the cost of ambition, how striving to be better than others makes us worse, and we need to talk about that. But here's a theologian who is deeply involved in culture and the cultural background for what we're talking about. I personally like that because I was sort of a cultural student of youth ministry and produced the Center for Youth Studies and so forth, so that really pleased me. He also goes deeply into biblical references that you might not be thinking about from Ecclesiastes here and there from the Bible, plus classical writers. And but he looks for theological implications for basic truths, and he's interested, and here's what we want to do today, is to start talking about our personal lives and how we see this into our personal lives. I'll try to give you a little example of that. So some of you have read this book, but as you noticed in the note, you don't have to have seen this book to get into this discussion. So we're asking the Lord to bless us as we go along here. And I'd like to start off with, probably today, I'll be watching the Patriots. And I record it so I can skip the commercials. And very often, my brother Paul, 2 weeks ago, came out of Mass General Hospital with terrible heart complications and directly to my house so he could watch the Patriots with me. Now, how many of you happen to be, now this is an honest, deep question, but how many of you happen to be Patriot fans? Okay, now, those of you that raised your hands, I'd like to ask you a question. If the Patriots win 2 or 3 more games than they did last year, how many of you will be happy? Oh, wow. Well, maybe you don't need this book. Wow.
Follow-up question.
I will not be happy. Because they only won 4 games last year. 2 more would be 6, and they'd have a terrible record. So I want them to
Can
be...
I vote again?
Yes. So that's the beginning of things. And it reminds me, too, of my brother. I'm the oldest of 8 living, and 7 now living. And so all of us left Connecticut, where we were born and grew up, at a pretty early on, long time ago. And one of our brothers, the one brother who never got to college, he went to Bible school but not to college, stayed, and he had a gas station in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And so Bridgeport, we all grew up as Yankee fans because Bridgeport is a suburb of New York City until you get to New Haven or Hartford. And so we grew up down there as Yankee fans, except for Peter. He was going to be ornery, and he was a Dodger fan. And but the Yankees did better than the Dodgers, mostly. So we felt a little superior to Peter, and just a little bit. And then Peter was the only person in our family that had a divergent political position from all the rest of us. And I'm sad to say that I think we felt a little superior to him about that. Because they were gung-ho on their side and so forth and so on. And so that's what this book is sort of about. Because we're cultural creatures, we have been culturally trained to feel that we need to exceed other people. So I'm asking our Lord to bless this conversation about this book, whether you've got it or whether you've read any of it or not. And today we're just looking at the introduction and chapter 1. And chapter 1 is about a great church in Constantinople. That everybody that I know that has visited Constantinople and gone to that church, which is the main attraction, Hagia Sophia, they are sort of blown away by it. And so Miroslav begins talking about that temple in this first chapter. And behold, the greater than Solomon is here. I was a little rinky-dink, undeveloped freshman at Columbia Bible College, and I became friends with a young, very young Baptist pastor who was just a couple of years older than myself, out in the backwoods of South Carolina. And you know how Baptists like to get words to preach off of. And he had heard about this young guy that went away from a rural town, and he got educated in an MDiv in some prestigious school, and he came back, and his first sermon came off of this. He came into the pulpit and he said, "Behold, the greater than Solomon is here." And he went on and on, but he would tell that story, so this really stuck with me. Now, Miroslav is saying that the temple, Solomon's temple, which took people's breath away when it was built, and he does it in meters, and meters don't mean anything to me much, and I could never get it straight, so I had to transcribe this. But Solomon's temple, that people were blown away by back then, was 90 feet long, 30 feet high, and 58 feet high. That's just a little less than 2 telephone poles high for Solomon's temple. And it was an incredible thing. And when it was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, that was a terrible thing because it was part of the Jewish culture. It was the center of Jewish culture. And then Justinian came along, and you know his story, that he saw this sign in the sky, he became a Christian, and he had built an incredible church, the Hagia Sophia, and it was 2,430 feet long, and it was 810 feet high, wide, and it was 180 feet high. Now that's about 6 telephone poles on top of each other. So that's really high. And Volf is coming off telling the story, whether it's absolutely true or not, that when this was finished, and he had it built really fast because he wanted to beat out a woman who had built another great church in Constantinople. This is when Christianity first becomes the official religion of the whole Roman Empire. And so Justinian rushes into this church when it's been built very fast, which is going to lead to its decay, a need for refurbishing and restructuring. And he throws down and he cries out to the Lord, "Thank you, God. A greater than Solomon is here." And you can tell why with these dimensions that this incredible church, the largest church ever at that time, was built. And so he is saying that this is built into our culture. And Volf tells the story of this old fish meeting 2 young fish coming by. And the old fish says to the 2 little fish, "Hey guys, how's the water?" And the 2 little fish swim on and they turn to each other, and one of them says, "What's water?" And this is important now. Volf is saying that we are cultural creatures, but we don't fully get it. Particularly as Christians, we don't fully get what that idea is about, that we're swimming through water. We're swimming through cultural water that is deeply ingrained in us. And so without knowing it, without knowing why, I have had to fight little superiority feelings towards one of my own brothers. And so that's what I think he is really talking about. But let me ask those of you who have begun reading the book, what has impressed you about this so far? Can you make any kind of comment about, well, how did the book strike you? What questions did it raise? Did it challenge you in any way? It may not hit you all at once, but yes, Jan.
He's so broad and deep in
Yes.
pulling in church history, and putting it in the context of today, that I found it so, oh dear, that's so true. That's what I was feeling, that you see it in religion, you see it in politics, so much this better than. Even that slogan, "Make America Great," is such a better than. It's not, he talked about, it's okay to make oneself better. The problem is when you want to be better than someone else.
Exactly. And his book, Exclusion and Embrace, I remember our classes in racism. When we got to that book, it just seemed to take us to another level, a whole other level that deep in us, we feel an exclusion from some others. and how difficult it is to turn exclusion into embrace. And I think this idea of Verislav Volf being broad, but he's very, very deep. So I began to feel that this book is repetitive. And I think it is repetitive, chapter after chapter. Next week we'll have Joel Anderley, and then we'll have Alan Lynch that will be presenting from this book for 2 times each. And I've been afraid that we're going over the same thing. Well, we are. We are going to be going over the same thing, but as Jan says, it's important, I think, that we allow it to go deeper, deeper into ourselves. And that's why I told my story about myself and Peter, my brother, to get to that. So he begins not only biblically, but with a thinker, Rousseau. Rousseau was a very powerful figure in the Enlightenment in Europe. And Rousseau talked about 2 kinds of self-love. Self-preservation, which can lead to proper humanity and virtue, and factitious self-love, which gives rise to strife and vice. And so there's a lot of people, and I guess all Christians today, wherever they are in the political spectrum, are talking love. But how differently at a deep level this love may come out when we really get to, is it a love of competition over others? Is it a love for power, wealth, and so forth? Is it a love for service? Is it a love for uplifting the lowest and so forth? That has to be interpreted. So from Rousseau we go to Adam Smith and Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes first and historically, and then Adam Smith. And they too were talking about economics and the structure of economics within a country. And so it's important to understand that striving for superiority, the striving for betterment, is natural to human beings. You know, Volf doesn't say this, he doesn't get into this, but to me this is very important. See if it's important to you. I think we have not interpreted that 3rd chapter of Genesis, which ties in with the temptations of Christ in the Gospels, where the devil comes to Adam and Eve, and the emphasis of a lot of people is on the fruit. I think the emphasis of that encounter is the deep thing that the serpent says to them, and if you take this, you will be like gods. Now, I think that really interprets in my life as Dean, your way, you've got this figured out. And Dean, if you just follow that, it's going to help you and it's going to help other people. And that's a good part of it. But if it says, Dean, you're going to understand this better than other people, then that begins to look towards competition and striving for better. So I don't know that Christians have really taken a look at the fact that every problem in our world, the huge problems, Gaza, the Holocaust, the huge problems in our world, and the little problems of our world. I've got 5 very close friends that we meet on Zoom every other week. All of us are retired young life leaders in New England, and we share together. And in that group, I think that we have seen ourselves looked down upon by the rest of Young Life in much more prosperous and growing, taking more kids to camp, having larger Young Life clubs, spreading out from town to town. And we have felt inferior. We have been made to feel, we used to be made to feel inferior as Young Life leaders because we had Howie Rich was just stuck in Danvers, doing a beautiful job in Danvers. But he was never willing to expand to another town because he's doing such an intense job in Danvers. Or my cousin Jack Carpenter in Darien, Connecticut. They knew every kid. They would have their volunteer leaders study the yearbooks from the previous year to greet every kid coming to school in the fall by name. And we were proud of that. We felt that was important, but we felt looked down upon and inferior. And that's a strong part of it. And in that group that I'm in, we started talking about churches. Not this church, but 3 of their churches were just a mess for totally different reasons. And that hurt me so much because I love churches besides the church. And but last night, Gail and I went to an Emmanuel Gospel Center send-off of somebody that was a woman that was just retiring, that had been the most terrific fundraiser they had ever had and put them on the map, so to speak. And we went to that group, and that group was sharing about this woman, but about each other in a way that I sat there wishing that that was the spirit of our church. And I think that coffee hour here comes closest to that of the churches that I see around, that we love each other, especially when Jan gets up and starts telling us stories. She's a model of it, and we are a loving church for the most part. But, you know, there are so many churches these days that are going under and feeling under. And I think that Volf is trying to get us into that. So he's making this distinction from very pertinent writers about the difference between striving to improve and striving to compete. Anybody got an example of that from your life? Or somebody you know, somebody in your family? The difference between striving, with which you can't have a good Patriot team if they don't strive. But they are striving to be better, and I'm part of that. I don't quite know what to do with that, plus the injuries, as a Christian. My atheist sister, the youngest of the family, is bright, brilliant psychologist in New York. She really condemns Paul and me for watching football and having this football thing. And I don't want the Patriots just to improve this year. I want them to be better. And I'm gung-ho about that. And I talked to Jesus about that. He hasn't given me a final answer. But is that clear? And so not only going from Solomon, Volf in this first chapter, is going into writers who have been keen analysts of culture. So it does relate corporately, because I think, again, a lot of us, when we come to church, we get away from the world and all that's happening in the world, and we want to come to a place where people are not striving to be better than us. That's personal. But this is not only a principle that operates on our individual relationships. which are so important. But it's also something about the church. And one deep sadness in my heart right now is the fact that the Anglican Communion, led by the new woman Archbishop of Canterbury, this church of ours, this broad church, which the British Empire established all around the world. So there's Anglicans all over the world. But we are now, and the conservative Anglicans of the Southern Hemisphere have met and call themselves GAFCON. And GAFCON is now deciding to make the separation from the English church and its Anglican communion around the world separate. So our Anglican communion that was together is now separating. And there are definite feelings of doctrinal superiority, biblical interpretive superiority that's feeding that. So instead of asking each other, how could we, as this side, become better? And how can you, as your side, become better and stay together as Christ has so earnestly prayed for us in John 17? We're going to divide. And that's a sadness that fills my heart. And I think you probably agree with that. That's sad. So when I ask myself, Jesus, what kind of a politics do you want me to have? Jesus, what kind of economics should I support? And Jesus, what kind of church and theology and doctrine should I have? It's so, I can either do that to improve myself and to become a more loving creature for all, or I can allow that to become a competitive thing, saying, I think I've got a better answer. I've got a better answer than the other side. And that seems to be the issue that hits me. So we talked about Rousseau and Adam Smith a little bit, and Hesiod, he goes back to Hesiod to show the beginnings of understanding of certain very deep penetrating poets, Greek poets, to French philosophers, German philosopher, and he gets into this deep sense that there is a division between, for instance, the god Isis, who had a good side of making people want to be better, and the bad side, which made people want to be better than, which led to strife and jealousy and war even. And I think we can see that in so many ways. Volf quotes Ecclesiastes 1, 7 and 8. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear with hearing. And that's in all of us. And that's the secret of the internet today. That's so influencing particularly our younger people, but at least distracting me and all of us. The distraction of saying, oh, you saw this? Well, look at this. You heard this? Well, listen to this. And that's how I feel that we're beginning to operate. And that's what Volf is beginning to fear. And that's why he's written this book. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear with hearing. Let me read just a little bit from the book itself and see if you have some questions about it. On page 13, and reading just a little bit of this page. We are under pressure to strive for superiority over our competitors. More often than not, there are no objective standards of excellence. What counts as excellent is a moving target. So we're influenced by culture. Culture is changing. I've noticed that in the fact that back as I started youth ministry in the late 40s, and then the 50s in New Canaan, Connecticut, and then in the 60s with urban Puerto Ricans and blacks down in the Lower East Side, Manhattan. I noticed that young people were changing back then, and their music was changing, and the movies they went to. And then in the late 70s and 80s, they came out, I wish I could quote the producers, but 16 Candles and Breakfast Club, and all those, suddenly there were adolescent movies. And not only the kids, but the adults were getting kicks out of it. And they wanted more and more, and we got more and more. And I began to notice how the young people that I was speaking to were really changing out of this. And that I needed to know a little more information about how the magazines that came out for teens in this time, the early 80s, and how the movies, and how the television, and how sports, and how all these different areas of their life, the schools themselves, and their relationships to church or non-relationships to church. And I began studying the culture, and there was an incredible change. But now, I feel the strain of public school teachers. And they are telling me, and adolescent counselors, they are all telling me, and I also go to this one research center, it's called YPulse, and it's keeping touch with the pulse of youth, Generation X down and so forth, and I get their letter, the free letter, wanting me to subscribe for the very expensive stuff, which I don't go on to. But anyway, there is a noted change in teenagers today, a noted change in them. When I talk to them to begin, they don't want to listen to anything I've got to say to them. My best relationship with teens today, my grandkids and others, is to ask questions and let them talk and try to ask questions that will put them and myself in the dilemma of what they're feeling. The dilemma of what they're feeling, the anxiety that's there, and so forth. And so that the culture is incredible. And we are hopefully taking the parable of the two fish. We're swimming in waters that we're not even conscious of, because that's our culture. We're brought up to. And so we check the news on the cell phone. We check messages, and we try to look to see, am I being noticed? And am I being noticed in a negative way, or am I being noticed in a positive way? And that's what Volf, I think, is talking about. Let me read just a little bit more from Volf. Striving to be better than others has become an integral part, not just of our values, but of our identity, and therefore our desires. When others have outdone us, we feel inadequate, inferiorized, made certain of not just whether we can perform a task, but whether as human beings we are adequate. Unsurprisingly, depression has become a signature psychological disorder over the past 50 years or so. As Elaine Ehrenberg, here he is quoting from an intellectual of our times, as Ehrenberg argues in The Weariness of Self, depression is, quote, a malady of inadequacy, afflicting those who have a painful sense of failing to achieve by being better than others. And going on just a little bit more, on page 15, despite the typical status and material well-being of the young people of today. They are caught in, what they are caught in has deleterious effects on their mental health. The authors of a review paper made no bones about what they see as the underlying cause of these maladies, attributing it to, quote, the pervasive emphasis in contemporary American culture on maximizing personal status and how they can threaten the well-being of individuals, of communities. I had the privilege of, we were having a family gathering at my daughter Debbie's house in Magnolia. And she has two boys, both with partners from the West Coast. And the two boys were there, and the older one had his partner with him. And wow, I thought about this, and I prayed about going over there because he is a consultant. He and his brother are both consultants. His younger brother is a consultant as to how a business can be better organized. The older one, Jack, that I was thinking of, is a consultant as to how companies and products can brand themselves and present themselves to this changing culture. And he is very close to his partner, Lydia. And Lydia was not only a great influencer, got to be an influencer with 1 million followers, but now she has joined with another very successful influencers on training, mentoring would-be influencers that are coming up. And I said, I'm going to be going over there tonight. Dear Lord, help me. And so in an amazing way, everybody else but the three of us went next door for a dessert, second part of the meal. And for different reasons, the three of us stayed there around the table. And I talked with these two people, that young people and 30 years old, 30-something, and I'm looking up to them as experts in what I'm keenly interested in. And so we began talking about what influencing and what branding and advertising is doing to our culture. And the three of us got in common dismayed. And I asked them, well, I'm an assistant pastor, and I'm trying to be an antidote to this culture. What advice would you give me? And they were thrown. It got to the young woman, Lydia, to the extent that I got to go up and do some business. It was just, it got to be so deep and heavy. And so Jack and I, my grandson, continued to talk about the situation in the world. As to what Volf is saying is, as he draws, not only from top researchers of our culture today, but as he draws from scripture and a Greek poet of the 700 BC and of Rousseau and Kierkegaard and all, that's what we're reading about, and that's exciting to me. Any comments or questions on that?
As a grandmother, I was so, I have been troubled about this, but to read the section on the influence of social media and to watch my grandchildren up and down based on things that are liked or disliked or followed, or just the tremendous pressure that's on them, the lies that are fed to them through social media, and how to help them be discerning to know. Now, they have parents who watch how much time they're on that, which is good, but they're not with them all the time.
Right.
And so those things, and I'm glad when I see schools starting to pull them, put those phones away, but that persistent, it's like the evil one that whispers in your ear. When I think about, is it maybe it's in Philippians or Ephesians, where, it's like the enemy comes and says, remember you did this? Who do you think you are? You
Yes.
start preaching and trying to go, remember, I saw you do that, I heard you say that. And I think that phrase that they had, that in the weariness of the self, that depression is a malady of inadequacy, just hit me so profoundly on the
Well, that is great. Did you all get that? Malady of...
The malady of inadequacy. It's such a powerful 3 words. I see that within our culture so much. I fight it at times for myself as an older person. Where am I inadequate? Asking it of myself is one thing, but letting somebody else put that on top of me is the stuff you have to guard against, or comparing. Somebody else is not as feeble. Somebody else is not as slow to remember. Somebody else, whatever it is. But I thought of, I have a daughter who's a psychiatrist. I have a daughter-in-law who's a therapist. And while they don't talk about anybody in specifics, they have heavy caseloads of people from young to old who have this feeling of inadequacy and things that have so deeply troubled them. My daughter, my eldest granddaughter, just flew out to California for the funeral of a close friend who committed suicide. And I thought this inadequacy is so prevalent. And when you have social media body shaming you and doing the kinds of things that pummel the young people, my prayers for them are for the whole armor of God.
Yes. Thank you. Dr. Swetland, professionally.
Along with social media, sort of stemming from it because it's technology.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sure, thank you, sorry. Just looking around the room, everyone but Ezra was from a generation that technology progressed at a certain rate where we could emotionally integrate. It didn't move as fast as it has been moving in the past 15 to 20 years. And that speed of change has been hard for, I think, some older generations, even myself. But it has also raised expectations for younger people. But from the developmental perspective, you can't speed up your development. So you're trying to process the bombardment of information, and now you have access to the world's information where you have the intellectual and emotional maturity to be able to handle it. And this is something that I see daily as a counselor at work. It's just similar to what Jan was saying. There's a sense of inadequacy because they don't know where they fit in with all of this onslaught of information. It's really too much for them to be able to handle. I don't know that I could have handled it at their age either. But
So can I handle it?
no.
Thank you, thank you.
But that speed of technology has really made it. It's just accelerated the time to be able to integrate and figure out whether or not certain forms of technology are helpful, useful. It's just that's already passé and move on.
Thank you. So good to catch that speed of the speed of the world and the culture can't be captured by a developmental set. And go ahead.
I am curious about the water, the culture that I'm swimming in. And I'm reflecting back to Jason's formation class about learning how the Romans behaved and how they were pointing out how they differed between men and women. And how I was reflecting how that still exists today. Or now we're going to study a Danish philosopher. So that Danish community, happiest people on earth. So just that context of where we are today, how we got Bill was, I believe he's Swiss, so they thought they were superior watchmakers, but the French, you didn't matter, so there was already, just in that culture, he was.
Yes.
So I'm curious about the water, and how that water has been developed, because here's America, and here's our teenagers, here we are. Why do we think we're so superior as a young country? But, so I'm always curious as you're teaching us about history and going back to Solomon. All right.
Thanks.
There's been other thoughts other than Great America here.
Megan.
Inarticulate here.
Speak up
You were
loudly.
talking about the ambition earlier and sort of the aspiration to be better people, but I think those are two different words. Ambition is very much trying to be better, stronger, smarter, more beautiful, more whatever, more popular on social media, whatever, that ambition. And we have forgotten, I think we've forgotten how to teach. We're telling our children you have to succeed in order to make it in this world, and but also to teach them at the same time to aspire to be a better person, to make the world a better place, to put others' needs before your own, because we're swimming in a water where it's just like gimme, 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 rather than who's being left behind.
Thank you.
And I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's good. That is good. Jeffrey. Go ahead.
What an important book. I'm glad we're studying it. Thank you so much for prioritizing this. I think the water we're swimming in, like I'm listening, is late-stage capitalism, right? And I think it's impossible for us to talk about competition or moral development without really thinking deeply about capitalism and how, from a Christian perspective, it's like the most pernicious false gospel I think we face at this season in our faith's development. And I think, you think about individualism and competition, like the system is designed to promote that. The system is working according to design, right? And it's atomizing us and putting us in competition with one another, which is completely deleterious to community, which I think is what people are longing for, and I think is probably.
Thanks for bringing us right back into the gospel, Karen.
Dee, I love how you threaded in the topic of love in this presentation. I've been just ruminating on that, and it's making me think that there's love with a capital L, and there's love with a lowercase l. And we, as we've been talking about, the fish live in the water and we live in our culture. I love that analogy. And we often hear the word love in our culture. And you were talking a minute ago about your work and determination to really listen to these teens, and I'm like thinking, well, that's, I don't even think you use the word love when you're talking about that, but I'm like, that's love with a capital L, and I'm like, I know that comes from your heart, and is that. But then we also in our culture, you hear a lot, people say, I love, and there's somewhere in there, it feels like they're saying they love more than whoever they're talking to, and there's something very unloving about that when you're put in that situation. And I just wonder if that's one thing this book is asking, is how we love with a capital L. I think that you're maybe thinking something similar. How do we teach our children, not just to say the words, but to have it in our hearts, and not just collect the feathers in their caps, but to really care for the world around us and the people that.
Thank you. I see my life as a struggle and a process of moving from the small L, the generic love I had for young people at the beginning, finally, slowly, and much through Gail's help, to move to a capital L, which we can only find in the grace of God. Christ has to love others through us, and that's when it becomes capital, I think, and it's very deep for me. Yes?
One thought that I had when I was reading the first chapter is, I haven't gotten these far enough to see if Volf kind of comes up with an overall conclusion about, what he's saying normatively we should be doing. But my own thinking is that, the desire for recognition and being better at, it's not something that can be overcome completely. It's part of our nature as human beings. I think there are actually positive aspects to it too. I think that technological developments have been driven by people who wanted to make a lot of money and be recognized. Now, were they happy because of it? Maybe not, but they also created a lot of things that make our lives a lot more comfortable and healthier and happier than they were before. And, it's kind of hard to separate too, achieving something for kind of your own sake and your own betterment versus wanting to be better than other people. Like on a personal level, I think I started running about 10 years ago. I'm not great at it, but I like doing it. I do road races every now and then. And for the most part, I'm just trying to, kind of look at my own time and everything like that. But when I get near the end of a race, I always want to beat the last few people right in front of me. So it's all kind of mixed together. And I don't think we should be trying to send the message that, you just have to wipe this out completely. I just don't think it's even possible. But I think it is important just to kind of, try to remember and to teach our kids that if you get too obsessed by it, it doesn't bring happiness, it doesn't make you a good person, it's not a good way to be thinking of other people. You've got to kind of be conscious of it because it has very bad sides also.
Wow, this hasn't been easy to get to this point. If we announced the text at the beginning of the session and I asked for discussion, it wouldn't happen because it's so subtle and all these things that you're contributing. Meg, do you have a final thought?
Oh, yeah, and it's just because of the road racing. It says the Christian road races where the people in the front are running to the back to help the other ones catch up.
Very good. Well, we haven't had time to get to Miroslav Volf himself on the video, but you'll be seeing him 6 more times. So I think it's been much better hearing from all of you. God bless us and take this and get us pondering something which is, I think we come to church to be reminded of how we live in the world of small l, and we are headed for and need to gain more of what the capital L. How do I love myself better? That's what the world, a lot of psychology is talking about. But I think the culture has forced people, when they determine to love themselves more worthily, they end up with a small l, a dependent, a captivating L, rather than the freedom of capital L. So God bless us all. Thank you.